Hello, today's Monday, April the 6th. I hope that you were able to finish all of your assignments for Because of Winn-Dixie. Just a reminder, make sure you have these items before we get started with the video. You need your folder that's labeled Winn-Dixie, your book, a piece of notebook paper to write your assignment on, and a pencil to write with. So if you don't have these items in front of you, pause the video, go grab them. Also, on Friday, you had an assignment. You were to read Chapter 5. In your folder, you needed to answer on page 6 questions 3 and 4, and on page 7, you needed to finish up answering questions 1 and 2. If for some reason you have not done all of these things, I need you to pause the video and go do it, because if you read ahead and haven't finished everything, your perspective is a little bit different in answering your questions. All right, so we are going to go on, and we had to read Chapter 5. I like Chapter 5. I hope you enjoyed this interesting chapter as we find out a little bit more about Opal and Winn-Dixie. And we find out soon enough that Winn-Dixie does not like to be left alone. And he would tear the cushions off. Hopefully he didn't tear them apart. Didn't sound like it. But he'd also unroll all the toilet paper off of the roll. Just something to keep himself busy, to show that he didn't like being left alone. Have you ever had an animal like that? We rescued a dog from the pound one time, and when we left that dog alone, that dog dug up the carpet by the sliding glass door, had ruined the shades that were in the window, bit them and messed them all up looking out so much. That dog did not want to be left in the house alone. So it was a long time in coming before we could do that. But sometimes we had to put that dog outside when we left. And they tried that with Winn-Dixie, and he howled the whole time. And if you were in the country, that would probably be okay. But they were in a trailer park. And you remember, she told Winn-Dixie he had to be the exception, not to bother the other people and the dogs and the cats. And so he was. So we'll find out in the story, Winn-Dixie pretty much goes everywhere Opal goes, as it's the only way to keep that dog quiet. So if you would, open up your folder to page 6. Let's go ahead. Oh, wait, I wanted to talk about that story some more. So that was just the first part of Chapter 5. And then we find a church service going on. Quite a lot of things happen during that, don't they? So we find that they tied the dog up outside. There was shade. It looked like a good spot. So everyone came in. And where was it? It was inside a store, a convenience store called Quick Mart. Thought it was interesting that it said quick, pick, or whichever way it went. And they tried covering it up, so they gave up. And they didn't have pews and chairs. So your comfort was dependent upon which chair you brought in. So you could bring a lawn chair in and sit down and have a church service. So they were singing and doing everything, and the dog was okay until the preacher started preaching. And then that's when he started making more noise than the preacher and interrupting. So Opal had to go grab Winn-Dixie and bring him inside. And he was happy, and so the preacher was talking, and all was good until Scurry, a little mouse, went running across, and Winn-Dixie saw them. The people knew there were mice there. They just didn't deal with it. There was always crumbs when they had a potluck dinner, and, just from the store. So they never bothered the people, but it bothered Winn-Dixie, and he took off, sliding across that floor to get the mouse. I thought it was very interesting. He never hurt the mouse. And so he just held on to it, and when it tried to get away, he stopped it by grabbing a hold of its tail, pushing it down and holding it. And the preacher just well, we need to pray for that mouse, and tossed him outside, and he was able to finish up. But if you look at the story here on page 38, after that, he prays, and we find out a little bit more about Opal in this story. So first she talks about she prayed for her mom. She missed her mom, didn't know her mom, but like what mom liked a good story. She thought, boy, she would really like this story about the mouse, because that was a good story. And then she talks about how she really didn't know many people, and there's only 4 people she mentions, 4 kids in here, and she figures they probably won't want to be her friend anyway because they're afraid she'll tell the preacher on them when they do something wrong. And so she kind of just tells us that she's lonely during this time. And so she prayed for the mouse too, that he landed softly. So we find out a little bit more about a couple of our characters. Turn to page 40 in your folder. Remember, we have our character chart there. Let's add a little bit more about Opal and Winn-Dixie here. I had the word caring for Opal. You may have one or more words if you've been adding it as you go. But also, I think we could go ahead and say she's lonely at times. So I'm going to write that down on my paper. Would you consider her to be understanding? Whenever Winn-Dixie, made a mess in the house, she understood she was just going to have to take care of the dog and take the dog with her wherever she went. When, the dog made too much noise, she knew she just had to go get the dog and bring him inside with her. So I'm going to put understanding, because it seems like over and over she understands. She even understands that, there's people there that she could be friends with, but they probably weren't, because being a preacher's kid can sometimes be a tough spot to be in a new area like that. Also, I'm going to put down that she is compassionate. Don't worry if you don't spell them correctly. I'm pretty good at deciphering words. But, she's caring. Her prayer kind of shows us the compassion. She cares about her mom. She prays for her mom even though she doesn't know him. She prays for a mouse that doesn't get hurt when it gets tossed out the door. So more than once we see her compassion. So, I've added some words: caring, lonely, understanding, and compassionate for her. Now, Winn-Dixie, we had put obedient down, but I think I'm going to put he's afraid to be alone. He has proven that he doesn't like it. To be alone. Okay, afraid to be alone. He also showed us that he can be very gentle. I mean, how many dogs you seen catch a mouse and be gentle enough with it that it's okay? He just caught it. Not too many. And then I also put that he was persistent. Do you agree? He didn't stop howling until they came and got him. He continued to mess up the house until they realized they couldn't leave him in the house alone. And then he would continue to howl the whole time until he was no longer tied up outside. So I thought that was some good things to add about our character right there. All right, go back to page 6. Let's go over what you were supposed to do. Question 3 on page 6 says, what does Winn-Dixie do when the preacher starts to speak in chapter 5? So this is talking about the church service, and I think he started howling and whining and disrupting the service. So you should have something written there that includes that information. It's a short answer. Remember, it doesn't have to be a complete sentence. Just state the fact in there. Don't make it long. Make it easy on yourself. You have enough to do. And then on question 4, it says, at the end of chapter 5, Opal talks to God about how lonely she feels. A, why does Opal feel lonely? And I've already talked about it, but your answer should say for A, there's no kids her age. She's only met 4 kids at church. There's not a lot of kids in the neighborhood. So something like that needs to be included in your answer. And B, have you ever felt the same way Opal does in the story? Have you ever felt lonely or like there's no one around? Maybe you're feeling a little bit more lonely right now because you can't be with your friends. You're not able to play with them. And you're only in the house with mom and dad and whoever, brothers or sisters. So maybe you're feeling a little bit lonely now. Go ahead and explain that. Or another time when you've moved to a new place. We've talked about it in library before. Sometimes you go to a birthday party and you know that person, but they have a whole bunch of family you don't know, and it's kind of awkward and you're kind of shy. You feel a little lonely right there in the midst of people. So make sure you have something written down there. I think all of us can think of at least one time in our life when we feel lonely. A little extra at the bottom, it says in 2 to 3 sentences, again, it doesn't have to be a complete sentence, compare yourself to the main character of the story, Opal. Some of the things I thought about there is a lot of times we don't know one of our parents. Something's happened in the past, and in today's world, a lot of times we're only with mom or with dad. So, can you compare yourself to not knowing one of her parents? Maybe you can't. Maybe you have both mom and dad there, and that's not a comparison. But she does have a dog. Do any of you have a pet? And is that pet your responsibility? Does it cause trouble? Whatever you can compare yourself to, alike or different from her there, is fine. Some other things, she has a place to live. You have a place to live. You have both parents. She has one parent. She has a pet. Maybe you have one. You don't have one. She doesn't have a brother and sister. Maybe you have several. So when you're doing a comparison, it's not necessarily how you are like, but it can also be how you are different. So when we finish, make sure you fill out that part so you can get it, or pause the video right now and do it real quick. All right, on page 7, I ask you to finish up this page. So let's skip down from the title that we think, and we did what happens in these chapters. And we'd already done chapter 1, Opal found Winn-Dixie. Chapter 2, Dad let her keep the dog. And number 3, Winn-Dixie got a bath. So I asked you to do something for chapter 4 and chapter 5, just to summarize the chapters. I want you to learn how to put a whole chapter in just a few words. It is so good when you learn how to do this. Some people want to give all the details on this. I just want a few words to describe the whole chapter. So for chapter 4, I put down that Opal learned 10 things about her mom. That's what that chapter was about. And that describes it. And you can suddenly oh yeah, I remember that. Gave you her whole list. And chapter 5 was going to church with Winn-Dixie. Well, we found out Winn-Dixie didn't like to be left alone and tied up and blah, blah, blah. But the summarization of the entire chapter is church with Winn-Dixie. There again, it stirs in our head. Oh yeah, I remember that. And it's a good thing that we can do. Okay, so if we have all 5 of those, and then it makes it easy. If you could get its title for chapters 1 through 5, what would you say? What would you call it? Maybe you put Finding Winn-Dixie. Maybe you put something like Building a Relationship with Winn-Dixie. If you give a title to, I want a title. I don't want my title up there. I want yours. I want you to think with those 5 chapters and the things that we wrote on those about them, what could you call a title? So now you're taking the 5 chapters where you've summarized them and try to push them into one and say, this section's about that. This is hard to do, but the way that we did it and broke it down makes it easier. As you get older and have papers to write, if you can do this and you practice this with Mrs. Dixon, it will help you later on. So it's a really important skill that you need to push yourself and try. All right, the next part, what is your favorite part of this section of the book? So in the first 5 chapters, what was your favorite part? It doesn't have to be long and wordy. Maybe you have a couple sections that were your favorite. My favorite part, I love the mouse story at church and how that happened. So it kind of puts everything we know about Winn-Dixie all right there in one little story. So that was good. It has a section that says, what new words did you learn in chapters 1 to 5? So if you learned a new word, you need to put that down. This is on every single section that we're going to read. So if you're reading a chapter and you come across a word that's new to you, just open up your book and put it in there for that section. That way you'll have it and don't have to go back and look. And draw a picture of something you think represents the first 5 chapters. I'm going to show you my picture. It's not good. So I just want you to show, I can draw, but I made it easy. I put a picture of Opal and Winn-Dixie, and I used stick figures. Yay, Miss Dixon. You know what? Because I don't want this to be hard. I want it to be easy. So don't stress over a picture. Just put something that would go along with summarizing. Again, you could do it with your title, Finding Winn-Dixie. So I have Opal finding a dog. They're together. That's all. Don't make it hard. All right. So that's today's review of what we did on Friday. I need you to do the following for your work. I'm going to hold it up. I've asked Miss Davis also to either put it online or email you so you have it so you don't have to catch the video if you don't get it written down. But just pause right here and write your homework down on that piece of paper that you have. So you're going to read chapter 5 tonight, and in your folder on page 6, you're going to answer the questions through. That's Friday's work. Never mind. Miss Dixon messed up. Here it is. Monday's work. I was making sure we did all that earlier. Okay, let's try that again. See, that's what happens. I make mistakes too. Read chapter 6. On page 9 in your folder, you're going to match up the words with the definitions. Again, if you don't know what the definition of a word is or you can't figure it out, just look it up, Google it, find out the definition so you know what it is. Also, keep an eye out. Are there any new characters that are introduced in this chapter as we go along? All right, that's Monday's assignment, or today's assignment. Make sure before you come back and join me on Tuesday that you have completed this part of your work. You guys, I miss you. Have a good day.